Welcome back to the Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton. I'm Stephen, and this is your final opposition preview of the season. I'm joined by John Lane from True Faith Newcastle United podcast. John, thank you for coming on.
Absolute pleasure, mate. Good to see you.
Well, looking at your season, it's been quite a brilliant one from all aspects, and I think for Newcastle fans, you'd look back on it as one of the best you've had in your modern history. Just sum it up for me a little bit.
The best. The trophy does that. We hadn't won a trophy in 56 years. Hadn't won a domestic trophy in 70 years. So straight away, that's, I haven't lived for either of those events previously. So standing in at Wembley to witness that, that just, tops anything that I could have expected. I think the flip side is the fact that when you look at the league season, I think we probably just weren't very consistent at the start of it. So up until December, I think we really struggled for form. That includes a game at Goodison where we drew 0-0 each and Anthony Gordon missed a penalty. But there were other games in that run where, we've either played well and we haven't got the result, or we've played poorly and we've managed to scrape something. And it was only really from the 14th of December onwards, when we played Leicester at home, we started to go on a bit of a run. And that's kind of helped propel with success. But to be in the position we are now, given the fact there's been no real first team additions and windows for the last 3 transfer windows now, to think that we've won a trophy and that Champions League football is in our hands in terms of qualification this Sunday, I just think that shows the amazing job that Eddie Howe and the lads have done.
Well, with you talking there about the playing squad and Eddie Howe, not many came in. You obviously you mentioned that before, but who would you think's been the standout player for Newcastle this season?
It's made such a massive difference having Sandro Tenali in that midfield. He just makes everyone's life easier. I think that's the biggest compliment I can pay him. It was interesting. Gary Neville's been talking about kind of the difference between him and Guimaraes, and he said that he felt like Bruno was the better of the two players. But I think Tenali allows Bruno to be better because he takes care of that defensive duty much better. I think he always looks like he's got loads of time, and I think for me that's always a sign of a quality footballer. If you always, every time you got the ball, look like you've got acres of time to do what you want to do, it's because you're in complete control. When you can see him moving and thinking, he's a bit of a chess player. He's looking to see where that ball's going to go before he even receives it. So he's just been such an important addition. And I say addition because he barely played last season, obviously due to his ban. But when he came back in against Forest in the League Cup, it just showed us what we were missing. And then again in December, he started playing regularly in that number 6 role, and that's just allowed kind of Bruno and Joe Linton to flourish in the midfield. So I think for me, he's probably the one standout for me who's just oozed class throughout the season.
Yeah, 100%. Whenever I've watched Newcastle this season, he seems to me to be, for me, the player who stood out the most, and he seems that he's got an added little extra bit of quality than what you've been used to Newcastle having in the last couple of years. He really is a Champions League player, as opposed to a Europa League or a Conference League player, and you really can see the difference. And I think when he signed, of course, there was the ban he got, but when he signed, I think that's what everyone was expecting from him. He was sort of a statement signing. He was a big player, and now he's finally showing that he's being able to get his place in the team, and settle down into that Newcastle side. So Eddie Howe, let's talk about him next. I mean, with regards to him, what a job he's done at Newcastle.
Tremendous. As I said before, he's not been given a lot of backing in the transfer market in the last couple of windows. Yes, there was significant investment in his first 2 or 3 as manager. But then when you go so long without a significant first team addition and you can't really freshen that squad up, things can become a bit stale. It was pretty well known that most of the players pretty much had a price tag on them in the summer. Depending on who, if someone came in for them, and you saw Gordon was linked with Liverpool. There was also talk that, I think Chelsea had, made inquiries about Isak and what have you. And that's really unsettling in a lot of ways. So it wasn't particularly pretty to start with. There were some questions asked of the manager approach in December, probably because since PSG, we hadn't when we beat them at St James's, since that game, we hadn't really been massively consistent as a side. And so people then start to ask questions to say, well, is Eddie Howe the one? And he really kind of, I think the cup final kind of helps kind of put that all to rest, because he had the perfect plan to beat Liverpool, and we absolutely dominated them. But not just Liverpool, throughout that competition. If you look at kind of the way that we played against Arsenal in the semi-finals, Brentford was a very professional job at St James's Park. Wimbledon was probably the dance squib of all of the games that we played in that competition. But look, you've got to kind of apply yourself in that way, and then one of the most impressive things about him is we obviously had the parade and the party at the Town Moor, and Eddie Howe stands on the stage and says, we're really pleased to have achieved this, and we've really enjoyed this, but we've got 10 more games and we can really achieve something. And the form coming out of those 10 games, we've had obviously the defeat at Villa, we drew at Brighton, obviously we lost against Arsenal, but I think we've won every other game. And we've probably deserved to win every other game when you look at that result, those results. And that's why we're in the position where we are now, where it's all in our hands against, with respect, a team that has nothing to play for. You're cemented to 13th place. Whereas, if we win, we're in the Champions League. And if we drop points, there's a good chance that we drop out of that.
Well, tell me a bit about that Carabao Cup win back in March, because that really is the crowning day for Newcastle fans. I mean, going into the Champions League, or playing in the Champions League this season against PSG, playing against Milan, Dortmund, all of those teams, I'm sure that felt great, but nothing's ever going to feel really as good as lifting silverware.
Absolutely not. I was at Wembley in 23 when we lost against Man United, and we didn't turn up that day. The fans didn't turn up particularly, and the players didn't. And that was, at the time, the worst Man United Man United team I'd ever seen in my lifetime. And we all know how dominant they were in from the early 90s all the way through till about 10, 12 years ago. So that really hurt. And there was a lot of talk there. Amanda Staveley had said at the time, "Oh, we'll be back and we'll win it." And that's just the kind of thing that Staveley would say. And I'm so grateful for what she did for the club to help change the ownership. But when she says something like that, you don't necessarily take it as read that that's what's going to happen. There was a real difference on the day. We had a live event at King's Cross that morning, and 10 o'clock in the morning, and there was almost like one of the questions that one of the panel asked to the room said, how many of yous could have done with having one less drink last night? And there weren't that many hands that went up, so people had really thought about, actually, I'm going to take it a little bit easier on the Saturday, and then we're going to kind of ease ourselves into the Sunday and make sure that we're in a position when we get in the ground. And then in the ground, everybody in the Newcastle end was standing up, and that wasn't the case 2 years before. And we absolutely battered them on the pitch. We dominated Liverpool for up until Guimaraes deciding he was going to try and do a little pirouette in the middle of the pitch, and Chiesa nicking one back for that nervous 8 minutes at the end. We were by far the better side, and it was the first time in my lifetime I've seen Newcastle United turn up at Wembley in every way and sense of the word, and we thoroughly deserved it. But nothing, I think, comes close to that. And I'm not sure if anything ever will. Maybe if we lift the FA Cup at some point, that might kind of hit that same height. But this part of the journey with these players, Dan Burn, a lad who had a season ticket as a kid in the East Stand at St James's Park. He had one point where he wasn't making it as a footballer, so he's having sort trolleys out at Asda. And he ended up working his way back up the leagues and into a position where he ends up playing for his boyhood club, where he didn't think that was going to happen. Like when the takeover happened, he basically turned around to his dad and he said, "I'm never going to end up playing for Newcastle now. Not now these are in charge." And he was the last signing of that window, and he's been an absolute credit to him. And you talked about standout player. I think we've got to remember Dan Burns had an England call up this year as well, and Thomas Tuchel doesn't have any loyalty to Newcastle United. Like, there's no main reason why he would pick him unless he thought he could do a job at the World Cup. So Dan Burn has been excellent for us, not just as a leader, but actually as a player as well in that more favoured left centre half role. And it's been very, very hard for Eddie Howe to even think about dropping him this year.
Yeah, well, I think from our point of view as well, it's given us a lot of hope that could be us next season. Obviously, there's Newcastle won the Carabao, Palace winning the FA Cup, and Tottenham winning the Europa League. All teams that are in and well, obviously Newcastle now a bit higher up, but Palace and Tottenham, all teams that are around us or below us. Newcastle just having that belief and not allowing themselves to be beaten. And it does feel a little bit with David Moyes coming back, and what you said there was a little bit similar to what David Moyes said on Sunday at the last game at Goodison, where he said, when I came in, this club felt broken, and it doesn't feel like that anymore. So, what are the thoughts on him since he came back, and Everton in general? Because we had that result at home against you, and I think it was October. But regardless of that, there wasn't too many Everton performances leading up to David Moyes coming in. But from the Evertonians' point of view, he really has sort of got the fans back on side with the club, and got us all, really feeling as though proud to be Evertonians again. And you saw it on Sunday with all the camaraderie and the fanfare outside the ground, that it really made you think what's going to happen when we do win something, because we're one of the most supported clubs in this country. That's never going to be in doubt. But yeah, what have been your thoughts as an outsider looking in?
I remember when he took the job thinking, I'm not sure I'd go back. Now, he went back to West Ham and it went well there. And I think when Moyes left Everton, though, I think there's an element. My mother's other half is an Evertonian, and I remember him saying, I think probably ready for him to go now. Like when he took the Man United job, and I think that was how I can remember the sentiment, that it was kind of like they were kind of understood why you'd have to take the Man United job, but there was no kind of massive grieving about the fact that Moyes was going, I don't think. So when he goes back, you wonder, are there some sections of the fan base that will be sceptical about having him back? But obviously it's a very different club now to kind of the state that it was left in when he left. And he's done a tremendous job. I think there's absolutely no doubt about that. I think, look, and I don't mean this with any great offence, but I don't think Everton are the best footballing side in the league by any stretch. But they're one of the hardest working now, which they weren't before. He's really got them fighting for every ball. He's got them, that they weren't on the beach. Obviously, Sunday was a massive game because it was the last game of Goodison. It was really important as a fan base that you had that. But he's been in every single game since he's been there, and you just have to look at the points tally since he took over from Sean Dyche to say that he sorted out. And actually, in fairness to him, he's come out, hasn't he, and said that things just needed freshen up. Dyche didn't leave it in a bad position necessarily. They just needed a different voice, and both him and Dyche have said that to independently of each other, So maybe it's the change that that the club needed. But David Moyes obviously understands Everton. He was there for a long time before. And I think it's probably really beneficial going into that new stadium, which there can be a nervousness about. I mean, there's all sorts of rumours going on about what will happen with Newcastle in our stadium and everything else, and where that could go to. And there's a lot of people that do not want to let go of St James's Park because that's all they've ever known Newcastle United in. And you can understand a little bit of nervousness about Goodison, but actually there should be an excitement there as well about moving into a new stadium and then bringing some of that, keeping that soul of Everton there. And I think Moyes will be a big part of kind of doing that for you. But to your point before about, the cup winners this year, it should give teams hope. And it's really frustrated me as a fan of the outside the traditional big six, shall we say, seeing teams devalue trophies or kind of thinking, right, well, it's only the League Cup or it's only this, and seeing teams that are definitely going to stay in the Premier League not trying to win these competitions. Because, look, as you said, fans want to see their club will win silverware, and just that moment at Wembley of us lifting that for the first time in however many years, as I said before, nothing kind of goes close to that. So, and actually, I think you said Moyes before. He's taken the FA Cup really seriously. He's taken the League Cup fairly seriously, and yeah, it should give other clubs of other fans hope. And I was buzzing when Palace won it. I really was, because I'd reached the point where it's just like anyone but City, just anyone but City win this competition. But to see Palace, who've never won a trophy in their lifetime, lift it, it's fantastic for football, and we need to see more of that in the coming years.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, John, I've said it since I was a kid that I'd happily finish 17th and win a trophy every season. It really doesn't make a
20th
difference
and win a
to me.
trophy some
Yeah,
years.
it really doesn't make a difference to me. If we bring that home, I don't think anyone's ever wondering. I'm sure most Tottenham fans will look back on this season and forget that they finished 17th because they've won that Europa League. West Ham fans with the Conference League, and it made me think a little bit about how these clubs do sort of devalue the trophies a little bit, and I really do think it's unfair. And the way how Champions League or Europa League has become the aim for all these teams, rather than just having that silverware to really be able to get behind your team. And we were a bit unlucky with regards to the FA Cup. We were already out the League Cup by the time Moyes came in. We were a bit unlucky with the FA Cup that we came up against a really informed Bournemouth side only like a week after he'd come back. So hopefully next season we'll be taking that one a bit more seriously, and it definitely feels that way anyway. In the new stadium, the best way to do it would be to win a trophy. But for Sunday, what about Newcastle for Sunday? Because this is a huge game for you guys. For us, not so much. But let's talk about the lineup. You might think we'll go out for Newcastle.
I think the lineup probably picks itself. If I'm being honest, we don't know about Isak. We don't know whether he's going to be fit for Sunday or whether he's still going to be out. I think he'll probably stick with what he's been playing, which has been this kind of 5-4-1, I suppose. So back three of Botman, Burn and Share, wing backs of Livramento and Murphy. And then he'll play Tenali and Bruno kind of as two holding midfielders. And then ahead of that, he'll have Gordon and Barnes, and then either Wilson or Isak up top, depending if Isak's fit or not. I think that'll be the side that we play. Wilson, as great a servant as been, has not looked anything like a player that we've seen before. He looks a shadow of his former self, if I'm honest. Like, I've been talking about, maybe do a really good job for a newly promoted side. I'm getting to the point where I'm not sure he'd be able to do that effectively, which is a real shame. So I think really what we need to do is we need to focus on what we can do. And, I think Anthony Gordon is going to he wants to put a few wrongs right, I think. Obviously, we had the game at Goodison where he missed the penalty, and I think that's going to be a massive motivation for him. He hasn't hit the heights since coming back after he got suspended after getting sent off in the FA Cup for the League Cup final. He then got injured on international duty, and then when he's come back, he's still kind of not at the level that he's set himself incredibly high standards. He had an amazing season for us last year, but that I think him and then Barnes has just been on form, and I think Barnes needs to stay in form to make sure that he doesn't lose his place. And I know that obviously we're going to go into a summer and all sorts can happen in that period of time. But Harvey Barnes has been excellent since West Ham away. He's just had a level of consistency we haven't seen from him before. And then obviously goals and assists to go alongside that. So for me, I think that's going to be the key is going to be if Isak doesn't play, can the other lads deliver the goals that we need? And ultimately, yeah, 3 points and we're in. 1 point, and we're keeping my fingers crossed that Man United can somehow pull out a point at home to Villa. But I don't think you can rely on that. I think we have to treat this like winning in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know what you mean. Is there any part of you that feels a little bit anxious and nervous going into it around the team? Is there a part that you really think that Everton could try and exploit?
I think the biggest worry for me is Callum Wilson playing ahead of Isaac. That's my honest answer to that. Apart from that, I fancy us. I do. I think Everton worked really hard, and I think they managed to stay in games. But I think if our midfield is clicking the way it is, if Tenali and Bruno are on form, like we control the middle of that field. If he plays that back three, like Botman, Bernard, Cher all kind of work really well together. So I think all those elements, I can't see us scoring. The question is can we beat your Sunderland supporting goalkeeper who cannot stand? He will be up for this now. One of the other lads on the podcast has said he thinks that also works against Everton in some ways as well, because if Pickford's not got his head screwed on in the right way, then that can have the knock-on effect the other way.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from with that one, definitely. But I can't see us getting anything out of this one. I'm pretty happy that we've ended up finishing top of that sort of mini table of really rubbish teams at the bottom. And we've ended up 13th. It's definitely something to build on going into next season for us. And 45 points, I think we'll probably finish on. I'm fairly happy with that, and as well having a trouble-free season with no PSR problems as well is good enough for me. But let's move on to the lineup quiz. I forgot to warn you about this one, John, but 26th of December 2015. I remember this one. It was Boxing Day, and I can't remember who would have been Newcastle manager at this point in time, but
Steve McLaren. That would have been 2015.
It would have been. I think I remember, yeah, and I think Tom Cleverley got the winner for us. But how many do you think you can get in that one?
I think I'll get 8. I think I'm confident if I can get 8.
I think definitely towards the front of the team is a lot more recognisable.
Okay, so I'm gonna say. I tell you what, I'll try and. I don't know whether I'm going to work backwards or start forwards. Gini Wijnaldum would have been in the team that day, I think.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Yeah. Sissoko.
Yeah.
Jose Perez.
Yeah.
Mitrovic.
Yeah.
So that's 4.
And then you're gonna have to start working back from midfield now.
Yeah, I think so. I'm gonna go with. Would he have started? I don't know if he would have started. I tell you what, Fabrizio Colaccini will go.
Yeah, definitely.
Trying to think who was still in the team at that time. Yanga and Biwa, did he start?
Not Yanga and Biwa. I think he would have been at
Chancellor
the club
and Bemba.
Yeah, and Bemba, yeah.
That's who I meant. That's who. Do you know what it is? That's who I could see in my head.
Yeah.
So I've got 6 there. I'm going to say that in goal, I'm going to go with Tim Krul in goal.
It wasn't Tim Krul. It was the second choice one.
Anik?
No.
Rob Elliott.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you've got one defensive midfielder and the 2 fullbacks.
Jack Colback?
Colback, yeah. Sorry, 2 defensive midfielders and 2 fullbacks. So you
okay. 2 fullbacks have been then. God, it's tough, this. Because thankfully we've had a lot of good memories since then. So a lot of these players you just kind of erase from your memory.
You went down this season, didn't you? So I think I'd have erased most of them.
Yeah. Who would we have been playing at fullback at that time? I think Santon had gone by then. Oh, Daryl Janmat.
Daryl Janmat, yeah. And then can you get the left back?
The left back, I'm really, really struggling with, which is not Paul Dummett.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. All right.
It is. So I wouldn't have been able to forgive you if you got that one wrong. If he was at Newcastle. One left, yeah.
Obviously, he did that wrestling move, didn't he, at St James's last year?
Yeah.
So I've got one defensive midfielder. Yeah, I'm going to go with Vernon Anita.
It's right. He's got all of
Wow.
them, all 11. Well done, Paul. Well done, John. That was absolutely brilliant. That. Um, yeah, not a lot of people go on and get all 11 straight away, but there was a few on the bench that I'd completely forgot about here.
Florian
Even
Thauvin,
Tony
was he on the bench for us?
Tovan was on the bench. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I remember the January after this one playing news at home,
Hmm.
and I remember Seydou Doumbia had just signed. And I can't remember, but there was another midfielder, wasn't there, that you signed? I think he wore number 8. But
Oh,
I can't remember who.
Vernon Nita wore number 8,
No,
so
I
I
must be
don't think.
thinking of somebody
Do
else
you
then.
think
But you had
John Joe Shelby would signed at that time?
Shelby signed, yeah,
Or
that might be who
so
I'm thinking of.
we signed Dumbia on loan, but we also signed Shelby and Andros Townsend in
Right, yeah, I'm
in
thinking
that
of
window.
Shelby.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that, and then Andros went on to play for us a couple of years after that. But do you know what? The bench was a bit of a weird one. There was Johan Gouffran was on the bench.
Yeah.
And that was sort of around the time, just after the time when Newcastle were full of French players, and it became a bit of a running joke.
Sylvain
Um,
Marveau, was he on the bench as well?
he
Or was he
wasn't.
gone?
He
He
wasn't.
might have
He
gone
didn't
by
get
then.
onto the bench. CM De Jong was on the bench though.
Yeah. He was one of those players we thought was going to be really good. So we'd signed his brother, Luc De Jong, who went on and
Hmm.
actually did decent things after us, strangely.
Yeah,
But he looked like a right donkey when we had him.
yeah,
But we
I
had
remember
him on
that. Yeah.
loan, and then we signed his brother like in that following summer.
Not some
Um,
very good, not bit uncreative transfer scouting. That by the sounds of it, sounds like something we'd have probably done a couple of years ago. But checked you out, Kevin and Barlow as well was on the bench, and Carl Darlow as well. So yeah, I think you're probably looking back on that team, glad with the one that you've got now, John. I would have thought.
yeah, that's true.
Well, I'm going to spoil your mood even more with the final question before I let you go. Usually, I ask for Mount Rushmores on this show, and I think I've already asked your channel earlier on in the season when we played you at Goodison. But I'm going to ask you for your anti-Newcastle Mount Rushmore. So 5 players who probably, if you were not really making a Sunderland one, but if you were going to make 5 players who the Newcastle faithful really can't stand, just to ruin your mood a little bit in case you get into the Champions League on Sunday.
Right, Michael Owen is probably top of that list, and I think a lot of that is his last kind of 6 months. It was quite visible that he wasn't very interested, but a lot of the stories that have come out since then about the fact he refused to play in case he was worried he was going to get a little injury, it got worse because then there was the stories about the transfer window. In terms of he had this clause in his contract where if we sold him we could sell him to Liverpool for 4 million less every year or something. So and he was desperate to go to Liverpool. So just Michael Owen for that reason. But I'm not sure, we were having this conversation a few days ago, I'm not sure anyone likes Michael Owen, like even anyone from former clubs. I don't think anyone particularly likes him. Who else can Newcastle fans not stand? What did I have to have played for the club before? Is that the rule, or could it
Not
be like any?
necessarily, no. Not
Yeah,
necessarily. I'll let you off if you put someone else in.
I reckon Jordan Pickford's probably on that. But you know what it is? He takes the stick really well. Like fair play to him, he does. But there are times when he lets it get to his head. But like I think just because he literally just cannot stand with, he makes no secret of that. Who else would be on there?
It's an
It's difficult.
incredibly tough question. I
That's
should have asked you.
really
I really should have asked you before
yeah.
before I come onto the camera,
No,
John.
no,
But
it's all right.
yeah, I mean that thing about Michael Owen, I really agree with you there. I don't think anyone likes Michael Owen. I've got to be honest, but
No
no.
one at all.
But so right now, I think the Mount Rushmore. You can have them 2 names, and then you can go back onto True Faith and debate that with the lads on
Yeah.
there. But thank you so much for coming on, John. Really, really appreciate it, and best of luck for Sunday. Yeah, of course, make sure you go and check John's content out. Where can we find it?
So it's True Faith NUFC podcast. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify. We've also got a Patreon channel. So if any Newcastle fans have wandered along this podcast by accident, we do have a paywall as well, which is up to £8 a month, but you get a podcast a day for that. And yeah, it's enjoyable. I've done it for the last 2 years, and but the channel's been around for about 10 years. So yeah, it's thoroughly enjoyable.
Amazing. If you're a Newcastle fan, go and check it out. I'm going to be on there as well, joining in with them for one of their shows shortly. So, yeah, make sure you get your comments in the comment section down below. Your score predictions for Sunday. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Toffee Blues, and we'll see you in the next one.